So today, the so-called star witness in House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer's sham impeachment inquiry of President Joe Biden was not in Washington testifying on behalf of House Republicans. That maybe would have made sense. You know why? He was at a hearing of his own in federal court in Las Vegas because Alexander Smirnov, the same person who's supposed to be the star witness, is charged with fabricating claims about the president and his son, Hunter Biden, in relation to a Ukrainian energy company. And for that, he could face up to 25 years in prison. A judge did release him on bail until trial, subject to some strict conditions, including GPS monitoring. And somewhat fittingly, based on his shadowy reputation, I think it's fair to say, we don't even seem to know what this guy looks like. We can't even show you a picture of him. Today, also a new filing just a few hours ago released from federal prosecutors added a pretty shocking, yet somewhat kind of predictable twist to all of this. I don't know if you're ready for this. Russian spies again. According to the government in this document, Smirnov, quote, claims to have contacts with multiple foreign intelligence agencies and had plans to leave the United States 2 days after he was arrested last week for a months-long multi-country foreign trip. During this trip, the defendant claims to be meeting with foreign intelligence contacts. Prosecutors go on to describe one of these supposed foreign intelligence contacts, a mysterious figure described as Russian Official 1. And wait for this. Quote, it says, Smirnov has reported numerous contacts with Russian Official 1, who has been described by Smirnov in a number of ways, including as the son of a former high-ranking Russian government official, someone who purportedly controls two groups of individuals tasked with carrying out assassination efforts in a third-party country. Pause for that for a moment. A Russian representative to another country, and as someone with ties to a particular Russian intelligence service. If this is all starting to seem and sound like a well-scripted episode of The Americans or Homeland or a crossover episode if you're a fan of both, there is more, prosecutors say, about this. They say this is not an isolated incident. Smirnov is still pushing new conspiracies. This is part of the urgency here, as indicated in this report filed today. And because he is still seeking information from foreign sources. It says, quote, the misinformation he is spreading is not confined to 2020. He is actively peddling new lies that could impact U.S. elections after meeting the Russian intelligence officials in November. In other words, the guy says he was still talking to Russian intelligence officials as recently as a few months ago about new ways to spread lies and misinformation to hurt President Biden's re-election chances. All of this while ostensibly serving as the star witness of the Republican smear campaign and impeachment effort. Now, this is a lot to take in. I will acknowledge that. I'm trying to explain it all as clearly as I can. But this report, this is public. All of the information is public, and I certainly encourage you to read it yourself. It also shouldn't be shocking, and it's worth noting that Russian language sources have been pushing this nonsense about President Biden for a long, long time. And I'm talking like long before he was president. According to a 2020 report from Democrats on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Russian disinformation about the president's supposed corruption in Ukraine is almost a decade old, dating back to 2015. When, quote, U.S. embassy officials in Kyiv noticed articles in Russian language media highlighting Hunter Biden's role at Burisma and using that to undercut anti-corruption efforts that were being led by Vice President Biden. Hunter Biden had been associated with Burisma for a year and a half at that point, with no indication that he had tried to influence U.S. policy towards Ukraine or Burisma. So why this story coming up now? The records provide an answer, as embassy officials immediately flagged the timing that Vice President Biden was traveling to Ukraine that same week to give an address to the Ukrainian parliament. And in that speech, the vice president pledged America's support for Ukraine in its historic battle against corruption. Hence, the state-run Russian propaganda machine got winding up. So there you have it. Then Vice President Biden wanted to take a stand against corruption in Ukraine. And according to the report from Foreign Affairs Democrats, the Russians responded with a whisper campaign to discredit Biden and his family. This is important and relevant because that same disinformation effort surfaced again when then President Donald Trump tasked Rudy Giuliani with digging up dirt about the Bidens in Ukraine. And it's surfacing again now, as James Comer and his fellow House Republicans grow, I think it's fair to say, increasingly desperate to fulfill Trump's demands of a Biden impeachment. But it's all the same nonsense it's always been. The Kremlin, by the way, is always going to look for potential assets. They have for decades. They're always going to look for sources to help spread disinformation. That's all been going on for a long time. That's one of their tactics. But there's an election in just over 8 months. So it's still pretty alarming that they are still managing to find officials in the United States who are wittingly or unwittingly helping them. Congressman Jamie Raskin is, of course, a Democrat of Maryland, and, of course, as we all know, the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee. So let me just start by just reading through this today. I mean, it's pretty startling that an individual who purportedly through his own account, had contacts with high-level Russian officials. He was supposed to be the star witness to the House Oversight Committee in testifying to try to impeach Joe Biden. I mean, how concerned are you that someone like him could have such a direct line to James Comer and House Republicans? Are you concerned that the Kremlin is getting to the people you're working on the committee with?
Well, it seems to me like everything is illuminated now. In 2016, we know that Putin had a whole cyber espionage and cyber interference campaign at the DNC and with Hillary Clinton. 17 of our national security agencies said so. The same thing happened in 2020 when Donald Trump's own Treasury Department sanctioned Putin for, again, his attempts to subvert and undermine our presidential campaign. So the same thing's going on for 2024, and all based on the same recycled lies they start off with. It is an amazing document here. This guy claims he only has $15,000. He actually has $6 million. He's up to...
It's a bit of a gap there.
Yeah, and he's up to his eyeballs in interaction with Russian intelligence agents, where all of this obviously began in terms of concocting the story that Burisma had paid Joe Biden $5 million. And that, that was the source of this whole wild goose chase that we've been on for more than a year now. They began to backpedal on it and say, no, it's not really about that. It's about something else. Maybe it's about China, or maybe it's about the California bar. We don't know what it's about last week. But now it's very clear that they've all been dupes to a Russian disinformation propaganda effort. And look, when I try to put the whole thing together, what I see is this. Vladimir Putin knows he can't challenge America militarily. I mean, we're the largest military in the world. We're 20 times larger than him in terms of our economy. He can't challenge us economically, but he figured that the Achilles heel was the openness of our society on the internet and social media, and that's why...
So we saw in 2016, it's continued.
And it's gone on. This internet research agency spent, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars just to try to subvert and undermine our political system with lies and propaganda, disinformation, and conspiracy theories. And this was a leading one, but it of course, continues to this day. And my Republican colleagues say, oh, this is just more about the Russia hoax. Really, what's the hoax? Is it the invasion of Ukraine? Is it the death of Alexei Navalny, or his attempted poisoning back in 2020, or his death just a few days ago? I mean, when they say Russia hoax, what are they talking about? They are basically echoing Donald Trump, who made it very clear when he was president of the United States that he would always prefer Vladimir Putin's version of the truth over what our own intelligence agencies say or what the whole world is saying.
I mean, the context of this, as you mentioned, is so important, given the backdrop of what's just happened, which you just outlined. I mean, reading through this, and Ryan outlined some of them, there's a lot of questions still. I mean, one of them I have is, when did Comer know about this, which I'm sure you don't know at this point, but you're probably wondering. Also, it struck me as this is clearly an ongoing effort by the Kremlin. This is a person we know about. But what are other questions you had reading through this that you really hope there are answers on or want to get answers on?
Well, my big question is for the Republican Party. I mean, I want to assume the best and give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that they really didn't know whether or not this is true, and now it is overwhelmingly likely that it's a lie. It's a conspiracy theory made up by Russian intelligence, pumped through Smirnov into America, and then they picked it up and they've been running with the football ever since. But it should be over now. They should close down the circus. It's over. What will they do? Will they just move on to a new lie, a new conspiracy theory that someone feeds them? Or will they say, hey, you know what? We gave it our best shot, but it's over. And why don't we look at something that's really affecting the American people, like gun violence right now?
Well, if only. I think we would love to. Now, we've been surprised in the past. I'm sure you even have been surprised. Do you think they're going to proceed at this point?
Well, they have proven to be nothing if not acrobatic in terms of, doing triple somersaults to try to land in a place where there's a whole new theory of what's going on. And if they just want to talk about political influence peddling in Washington, or they want to talk about the emoluments clause, then I'm all for it. We, the Democrats, put out a report explaining how we have documented receipts of Donald Trump pocketing nearly $8 million from the Chinese government, from the murderous monarch of Saudi Arabia, from the United Arab Emirates. Let's talk about that, and let's talk about developing a legislative apparatus to keep people in government from taking the American people to the cleaners by collecting all this money from foreign states, kings and princes, which is explicitly banned by the Constitution. So we could have a real discussion about that would be bipartisan or nonpartisan, but they don't want to do it. And they've refused to look at, everything that Donald Trump's son-in-law has collected, more than $2 billion that Jared Kushner brought back from the Saudis in a company he created the day after the Trump administration ended. So we could look at that question if they want to be serious about it, but instead they've decided just to follow, the paymasters back in the Home Office in Moscow.
With everything going on, it's sometimes easy to forget there is a Republican primary still technically going on. So before I explain all this, let me just acknowledge I don't agree with Nikki Haley on that many policy things. But I can still acknowledge that today in her home state of South Carolina, she gave a pretty solid speech, or what I would consider a pretty solid speech. And it wasn't even her first solid speech. I mean, she's been giving speeches like this for weeks, delivering attack line after attack line, making the case against her opponent, Donald Trump.
He's gotten more unstable and unhinged. He spends more time in courtrooms than he does on the campaign trail. He refuses to debate. He's completely distracted. And everything is about him. He's so obsessed with his own demons from the past, he can't focus on delivering the future Americans deserve.
I mean, if you're watching at home, you might be thinking, okay, Nikki Haley, what else do you have up your sleeve? I mean, she called out the cowardice of her fellow Republicans who are honest only behind closed doors, she says.
Of course, many of the same politicians who now publicly embrace Trump privately dread him. They know what a disaster he's been and will continue to be for our party. They're just too afraid to say it out loud. Well, I'm not afraid to say the hard truths out loud.
Again, lots of people should be able to get their arms around that. I mean, she made every argument and landed lots of hits against Trump and everything he stands for. The problem is, and this is a pretty big one for Nikki Haley, it doesn't really matter. Just take the primary split screen today. I mean, just 6 hours later at a Fox News town hall, Donald Trump gave his usual version of a conspiratorial, grievance-ridden, slightly outrageous performance. In any other world, or in any case study in a political science classroom, it's obvious who people voting would choose in this race. I mean, the younger conservative former governor, who isn't crazy, who shows discipline on the stump most of the time and in debates, over the often unhinged dictator in waiting facing 91 criminal charges across 4 jurisdictions. But all of this is a reminder that the outcomes of campaigns are not determined by academic exercises or deciding on paper between people's resumes, or cocktail party debates, of which many are happening around the country, especially on the East Coast right now, on either side of the aisle, by the way. They are about what voters think and want, which is not always predictable and does not always make sense. 4 days ahead of their primary in South Carolina, Donald Trump is ahead by nearly 30 points in Nikki Haley's home state because the Republican electorate wants Donald Trump. And if nothing else, the complete ineffectiveness of Haley's no-holds-barred campaigning over the last few weeks tells us this was never about the message of the other candidates. It has always been about the weird, hard to explain at times or understand at times, loyalty of the Republican base for Trump. David Plouffe was the campaign manager for the 2008 campaign and later served as senior advisor to President Obama. Sarah Longwell is the publisher for The Bulwark and host of the Focus Group podcast, and they both join me now. So, Sarah, let me start with you. I mean, because the Haley speech was pretty solid. She's given a bunch of solid speeches. I know David Plouffe and I have talked about some of her solid speeches in the past. It doesn't seem to matter. Can we just dispel the notion that anything would have been different had she or anyone done this sooner? Or how do you look at that?
Well, I mean, look, I think that something could have been done sooner, but I'm going back to sort of like the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, when there was still kind of a contingent of move on from Trump folks. I mean, it honestly has nothing to do with Nikki Haley. In a different world, Ron DeSantis was a different kind of candidate, meaning a good one, with a different kind of strategy, also a good one, which he didn't have, right? He tried to wrestle Trump for the always Trump voters who love Trump no matter what, instead of trying to consolidate sort of the move on from Trump voters that existed. Okay, so I do think there was a moment for something to be done. It passed a long, long time ago, though. Nikki Haley, her big problem is that voters do not want a regular politician. GOP voters, primary voters, they don't want a pre-Trump politician. And Nikki Haley is both of those things. I mean, simply by attacking Donald Trump, voters in focus groups in South Carolina said that she sounds like a Democrat. We talked to two-time Trump voters just last week. And, you know, they think they can't trust her. She sounds like even though she was their governor, they sort of don't remember that period of time when she was their governor. She is defined to those voters in her home state as somebody who is oppositional to Trump, and that means they can't trust her.
I mean, she has a lot of positions that if she were actually giving him a run for his money, Democrats would hate, which is what's so interesting about this. So, Love, let me ask you about this Fox News town hall, which I presume and hope you did not watch, but it was pretty predictable. And Trump knocked Nikki Haley in it. And I want to ask you about this because you and I have talked before, the night of the New Hampshire primary specifically, about how Trump doesn't really have, like, self-control. I mean, he likes to punch down a lot. Why is he even bothering, in your view, given that he's 30 points ahead in the next primary?
He just can't help himself, Jen. I mean, strategically, I'm sure his team has said, stop it.
Stop.
Everyone you do should be about Joe Biden. But he can't help himself. He's out there selling sneakers. By the way, you showed a picture of him or a little footage. He looks worse and worse every day. Maybe that's why Nikki Haley's staying in. I mean, I don't know. Physically, he's obviously out there hawking perfume to cover up his smell. He's, shoes.
Sneakers.
But at the end of the day, he is the Republican Party. And, maybe the best Haley could hope is somehow pull a surprise, get north of 40. Maybe she can do a little better of that in some Super Tuesday states. Obviously, if Trump were to get any more legal trouble, it would just help him in the primary. So maybe she's hanging around in case there's a health issue. I will say this, though. Those clips you just saw, and there's more, the Biden campaign and Democrats can feed those to voters in battleground states. As a reminder, Joe Biden's not saying these things, Nikki Haley is. And, some of that will get discounted because she ran against him. So I think that'll be a big part of the Biden campaign is having Republican voices out there that you're feeding to the couple million people that decide this election. So I look at that and there could be some compelling content. But at the end of the day, it does strike me that Donald Trump weeks ago should have moved on from Nikki Haley, and he won't. And so let's say she loses by 30 points on Saturday. He will still be focused on her heading into March, not on the general election, which is, again, just epic political malpractice.